The dog did not look lost. She looked afraid he would arrive 1 minute too late. At 5 in the morning, Gunnery Sergeant Ethan Cole drove north along the river road outside Astoria, Oregon, with both hands steady on the wheel and the heater barely cutting through the cold. Fog covered everything beyond the reach of his headlights. It erased the trees, softened the guardrails, and turned the road ahead into a narrow tunnel of pale gray. Ethan had traveled that route hundreds of times on his way to the docks, always before sunrise, always alone. The radio stayed off. He preferred the low hum of the engine and the familiar rattle beneath the dashboard. Then a dark shape stepped into the road. Ethan pressed the brake. His pickup stopped less than 20 feet from a German Shepherd standing in the center of the lane. She was fully grown, leaned beneath a sable black and tan coat darkened by mist. Water clung to the fur around her face and chest. A worn brown leather collar circled her neck, but no identification tag hung from it. She did not bark. She did not lower her head or retreat from the headlights. She looked directly through the windshield at Ethan. Calm, intent, waiting. Ethan shifted into park and opened the driver's door. Cold air entered at once, carrying the smell of wet cedar, river mud, and rust from the old railroad bridge nearby. "Easy, girl," he said. The shepherd turned away. She walked 6 measured steps toward the shoulder, then stopped and looked back. Ethan remained beside the truck. The dog waited. When he did not follow, she moved farther into the fog and disappeared. Ethan stood listening. Somewhere below the road, the river moved against stone. A metal sign tapped softly against its post. Then the shepherd appeared again, closer this time, her amber eyes fixed on him. She took 3 steps toward the old bridge road, paused, and looked back once more. Ethan knew that behavior. It was not wandering. It was not fear. The dog was checking whether he understood. He looked at the clock on the dashboard. 5:12. He was due at the docks before 6. Missing another shift would cost him work he could not easily replace. He stepped back toward the truck. The shepherd turned and began running along the shoulder, parallel to the pickup as Ethan slowly pulled forward. She stayed just beyond the headlights, appearing and vanishing in the fog. For nearly a quarter mile, she refused to leave the road. Ethan reduced his speed. The dog moved ahead, then crossed toward a faded warning sign marking the entrance to an abandoned maintenance path beneath the railroad bridge. She stopped beneath it. The bridge rose above her in black concrete and steel, its upper rails hidden in mist. Ethan's hands tightened around the wheel. He knew that bridge. 12 years earlier, his older brother Caleb had made his final radio call from somewhere near those supports during a flood that covered half the river district. The last words had never changed in Ethan's memory. "The river is rising. I am going back for one more." Search crews had found equipment, pieces of fencing, and a damaged rescue boat. They had never found Caleb. Ethan still drove across the bridge whenever work required it, but he had not walked beneath it since the memorial service. The shepherd stepped onto the maintenance path. She turned her head toward Ethan. One dark shape in a white world without edges. "Not there," he whispered. She waited. Ethan looked toward the road ahead, then back at the empty passenger seat. Beneath his jacket, an old field watch rested against his wrist, its scratched face identical to the one Caleb had once worn. The second hand moved with a faint, stubborn rhythm. Ethan switched off the engine. Silence closed around the truck. When he stepped outside, the shepherd lowered her head and continued down the path. Ethan followed at a distance of 15 feet. Wet grass brushed his boots. The fog thickened beneath the bridge, carrying the scent of cold water and old wood. The dog moved without hesitation, but every few yards she stopped and looked back to make sure he was still there. Ethan noticed something then that made him forget the docks, the hour, and every reason he had to turn around. Fresh mud marked the slope ahead. Across it ran the shepherd's paw prints. Beside them were smaller footprints, no longer than a child's hand. Near the first concrete support lay a single blue glove, soaked by the fog. The shepherd touched it with her nose, then stared into the gray darkness under the bridge. From somewhere below came one faint sound. Metal against stone. Once. Then again. The dog looked at Ethan. This time, she did not move forward. She was not asking him to stop. She was showing him where someone else had. Ethan crouched beside the blue glove without touching it. The fabric was child-sized, soaked through, and pressed halfway into the mud as if someone had dropped it while moving quickly. The German shepherd stood 3 feet away, her ears angled toward the darkness beneath the bridge. The faint metallic sound came again. Not loud, not urgent, just steady enough to feel deliberate. Ethan slipped the glove into the outer pocket of his jacket and looked down the slope. The maintenance path narrowed between concrete supports stained by years of rain. Water dripped from the underside of the bridge in slow, hollow beats. Beyond the first column, the fog thickened until the world became colorless. The shepherd took several steps forward, then stopped at a fork where one trail followed the river and the other curved beneath the tracks. She looked back at Ethan. He knew that look now. Follow. He moved after her, boots sinking into wet soil. The old field watch on his wrist ticked beneath his sleeve. Caleb had worn the matching one on every rescue call, even after the face cracked during a winter storm. Their father had given the watches to both sons when Ethan turned 18. One for each boy, he had said. So neither of you forgets when to come home. Ethan had kept his running. Caleb's had vanished with him. The thought returned now with such force that Ethan nearly stopped. The bridge above him groaned as a freight train passed somewhere in the fog, the sound rolling through steel and concrete like distant thunder. The shepherd lowered her body until it passed, then continued. She did not appear frightened. She appeared practiced. That disturbed Ethan more. Along the path, he noticed small pieces of bread placed near the edge of the concrete at regular intervals. Not scattered by chance. Set down. A few yards farther, a red ribbon had been tied to a rusted section of fence. The knot was simple, the kind a child might make. Beside it lay an empty white medicine box with the pharmacy label torn away by rain. Ethan picked it up and checked the inside. Nothing remained. "Who are you taking me to?" he asked. The dog turned her head, but kept moving. The river sounded closer now, sliding beneath the fog with a cold, constant rush. Ethan studied the mud. The child-sized footprints continued beside the dog's tracks for several yards, then disappeared near a patch of gravel. In their place was a shallow line, as though something light had been pulled across the ground. He followed it beneath the next support. There, tucked behind a wall of blackberry vines, he found a small handcart. One wheel was bent inward. A wool blanket covered several cans of food, a bottle of water, and a box of basic tools. No child, no owner. The shepherd pressed her nose to the blanket, then looked toward a darker passage beneath the bridge. Ethan felt his Marine training settle over him, not as panic, but as order. Observe. Listen. Move only when the ground makes sense. He took out his phone. No signal. The bridge blocked the tower, and the fog swallowed whatever remained. He turned on the flashlight and aimed it ahead. The beam caught damp concrete, old graffiti, and a second red ribbon tied lower to the wall. The shepherd moved toward it immediately. Ethan followed, counting the distance from the truck. About 300 yards. Far enough that shouting would not reach the road. Close enough that someone could still hear the river and believe help was near. The path opened into a sheltered space between two supports. A tarp had been stretched beneath a low section of concrete. Beneath it sat a wooden crate, a folded blanket, and a small radio with a cracked antenna. The shepherd slowed. Her tail lowered, not from fear, but concern. Then Ethan heard breathing. Uneven. Tired. He raised the flashlight just enough to reveal an older man seated against the wall, wrapped in a dark coat, one hand resting on the handle of the damaged cart. The man blinked against the light. The shepherd crossed the space and lay beside him, pressing her shoulder against his leg. Ethan stepped closer. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man nodded weakly. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "The girl," he said. Ethan glanced around the shelter. "What girl?" The man looked toward the path above the river. "My granddaughter. She went for my medicine before dawn." Ethan felt the blue glove in his pocket. "Is this her dog?" The man placed one hand on the shepherd's collar. "No," he whispered. "She belongs to the child who has not come back." Ethan lowered the flashlight and knelt beside the older man. Up close, he could see that the man was shivering beneath the coat, though the air under the bridge was not cold enough to explain it. His breathing was steady but shallow. The German shepherd remained pressed against his leg, amber eyes moving between Ethan and the path beyond the shelter. "What is your name?" Ethan asked. "Samuel Hart." The name meant nothing to him, but Samuel's face carried the look of someone who had spent too many years near the river. Weathered skin, gray stubble, hands rough from tools and cold metal. Ethan reached for the bottle of water beside the cart and held it out. Samuel took a careful sip. How long have you been here? Since before daylight. Why did you come down alone? Samuel looked toward the darkness beyond the tarp. Lily left home before I woke. She took the path beneath the bridge because it cuts nearly a mile off the walk to town. Ethan touched the blue glove in his pocket. She was going for medicine? Samuel nodded. My heart prescription. I thought I had one more dose. I was wrong. Ethan studied the empty medicine box he had found on the trail. Did she make it to the pharmacy? I do not know. Samuel's voice weakened. Nova came back without her. Ethan looked at the shepherd. At the sound of her name, she raised her head. Nova, he repeated. The dog met his eyes. Samuel rested one hand against her shoulder. She found me at the house, kept pulling at my coat, then ran toward the bridge. I followed as far as I could. His gaze moved to the damaged handcart. The wheel caught in the gravel. I tried to keep going. Ethan understood then. The shallow line in the mud had not been made by a child being dragged. Samuel had been pulling the cart. The food, water, and tools were supplies for the search. The ribbons marked a familiar route. Every clue had pointed toward danger because Ethan had expected danger. The truth was quieter. An old man, a missing girl, a dog trying to connect the two. Ethan checked his phone again. Still no signal. I need to get you back to the road. Samuel shook his head. Find Lily first. I am not leaving you here. Then you will lose time. Nova stood and walked to the edge of the shelter. She looked toward the upper trail, then back at Ethan. The same measured signal. Follow. Samuel saw it too. She knows where Lily goes when the fog gets bad. Ethan looked from the dog to Samuel. Where? Samuel pointed toward a wooden crate near the tarp. There is a map inside. Old bridge routes. Maintenance paths the county stopped using. Ethan opened the crate. Inside were rolled papers, a flashlight with weak batteries, a coil of red cord, and a wooden box worn smooth along the corners. The lid had been secured with a brass latch. As Ethan moved it aside, something inside shifted with a heavy metallic sound. Once, then again, the same sound he had heard from the path. He opened the lid. A field watch lay on top of folded maps. The leather strap was cracked, the glass face clouded with age. Ethan stopped breathing for 1 second. His own watch ticked beneath his sleeve. Same black face. Same narrow hands. Same small scratch near the number 4. He lifted the older watch carefully and turned it over. 2 words were engraved on the back. Caleb Cole. The river seemed to go silent. Ethan looked at Samuel. Where did you get this? Samuel's eyes closed briefly, not in fear, but exhaustion. From the night your brother disappeared. Ethan rose so quickly that Nova stepped between them. You knew Caleb? Samuel opened his eyes. I was the last man who saw him leave this side of the bridge. The words landed harder than the cold. For 12 years, Ethan had lived with an empty report, a sealed file, and a memorial without an answer. Now an old man under the bridge held Caleb's watch and spoke as though the past had been waiting beneath the concrete all along. Ethan's voice dropped. Why did you never return it? Samuel looked at the watch in Ethan's hand. Because your brother told me to stay with the children. By the time I came back, the road was gone, the records were wrong, and no one believed where he had crossed. Nova moved to the open crate and touched one rolled map with her nose. Samuel followed the gesture. He drew that path himself. Ethan unrolled the paper across the wooden box. A faded line curved away from the bridge, climbed the hill. Ethan stared at the words until the faded ink seemed to sharpen beneath his hand. Safe above fog. Caleb had written those same 3 words on the back of a trail map when they were boys, after leading Ethan out of a storm near Tillamook State Forest. Back then, it had meant higher ground. A dry ridge. A place where fear could not hide the road. Now the phrase pointed toward the old signal station above the river. Samuel shifted against the concrete and pressed one hand to his chest. Ethan folded the map carefully and slipped it inside his jacket. I am getting help before I go anywhere. Samuel shook his head. The nearest road is farther than the station. You need medical attention. And Lily needs someone who can reach her. Nova stood between them, tense but silent. She looked at Samuel, then turned toward the upper trail. Ethan felt anger rise, not at the dog, but at the years between this moment and the night Caleb vanished. 12 years of unanswered calls. 12 years of believing the river had erased everything. You had his watch, Ethan said. You knew his name. Samuel did not look away. I knew the name of the man who saved us. Then why did my family hear nothing? Samuel breathed slowly before answering. Because after the flood, I spent months moving between shelters. My wife was gone by spring. Lily's mother was still a child. The county changed offices. Records were lost. When I finally found an address for your family, your parents had moved. Ethan's jaw tightened. You could have tried again. I did. Samuel pointed toward the wooden crate. Beneath the maps was a bundle of unopened letters, each returned with faded postal markings. Ethan lifted the top envelope. His father's name was written across the front in careful block letters. The return stamp was 11 years old. Another was 10. Another 8. Samuel had kept trying. The anger inside Ethan did not disappear, but it lost its direction. Nova stepped closer and touched her nose to the field watch in his hand. Ethan closed his fingers around it. What happened that night? Samuel looked toward the river. The lower road flooded first. Caleb found me near the school bus turnout with 4 children and no working radio. He led us through the maintenance tunnel and up to the signal station. And then, he heard another call from the riverside. Someone was still below. Samuel swallowed. He gave me the map, took off his watch, and told me to keep everyone above the fog. Ethan looked down at the scratched face. Why remove it? The strap had broken. He said he would come back for it. The quiet under the bridge grew heavier. Nova moved to the shelter entrance and looked uphill again. Samuel followed her gaze. Lily knows that station. I told her the story so many times she can walk the route in darkness. Ethan unfolded the map once more. The line climbed nearly a mile through abandoned maintenance ground. If she went for medicine, why would she turn toward the station? Because the fog closed the lower path. She would choose the safest place she knew. Ethan examined Samuel's condition. Leaving him alone was wrong. Taking him uphill was impossible. The answer came from training, not instinct. Stabilize. Mark the location. Send for help. Continue only when another life depended on it. He removed the red cord from the crate and tied bright lengths along the route back toward the road. At the edge of the shelter, his phone caught one weak bar. He sent a location pin and a brief message to Deputy Mark Ellis, the local officer whose number Nora Whitman had insisted every dock worker keep. Older man under railroad bridge. Needs assistance. Missing child possibly at signal station. He waited until the message showed sent. Then he returned to Samuel and placed the water within reach. Help is coming. Samuel nodded toward Nova. She will take you. Ethan looked at the shepherd. You knew where to go all along, did you not? Nova turned uphill. No bark. No hesitation. Ethan secured Caleb's watch beside his own beneath his sleeve, 2 quiet rhythms against the same wrist. Then he followed her into the fog. The trail rose sharply behind the bridge, slick with wet leaves and old gravel. Nova moved ahead, stopping at each split until Ethan reached her. At the first turn, she looked back. Follow. At the second, she waited longer. Trust. By the third, Ethan could barely see 10 feet ahead, but the map in his hand and the dog in front of him held the path together. Then, somewhere above them, a small metal bell rang once through the mist. Nova lifted her head and began to run. Nova disappeared into the fog, then reappeared 20 feet uphill beside a rusted post. Ethan followed, one hand gripping the folded map inside his jacket while the other steadied him against the wet slope. The bell sounded again, softer this time. 3 quick notes carried through the mist, followed by silence. Nova turned toward a narrow break in the brush where old wooden steps climbed toward the abandoned signal station. The stairs were slick with moss and dark rainwater. Ethan tested each one before putting his full weight down. Nova, he called quietly. The shepherd stopped at the next landing and waited. Her chest moved fast, but she did not seem uncertain. She knew this route. The fog thinned just enough for Ethan to see a small building above them, its windows pale rectangles behind the trees. The signal station leaned toward the hillside as though the years had pushed it there. A metal bell hung from a bent bracket beside the door, moving slightly in the wind. Ethan reached the top and saw fresh marks in the mud. Small boots. One set. They entered the station and did not come back out. Nova pressed her nose to the door seam. Inside, something shifted. Ethan knocked twice. Lily? My name is Ethan Cole. Your grandfather sent me. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. Nova moved around the side of the building and pawed once at a lower window. Ethan followed. The glass was cloudy but intact. Through it, he saw a shape sitting on the floor beneath an old control desk. A child's coat, a pale blue scarf, one hand holding a paper pharmacy bag. Relief came first, then concern. The girl was awake, but she was not moving toward the door. Ethan crouched near the window. "Lily, can you hear me?" The child lifted her head slowly. Her face looked tired, but alert. She pointed toward the front door and shook her head. Ethan understood. "The lock is stuck." Lily nodded. Nova whined once, the first sound Ethan had heard from her. The girl's expression changed immediately. She crawled closer to the window and placed her palm against the glass. Nova lifted one paw and touched the other side. For one quiet second, fog, wood, and old glass separated them. Then Lily smiled. Ethan moved back to the door. The frame had swollen from years of weather. He examined the latch, then found a narrow maintenance opening beside it where the outer plate had pulled loose. Using the small tool from his pocket, he worked the metal carefully until the latch released. The door opened with a long wooden sigh. Nova entered first. She crossed the room and pressed her head against Lily's shoulder. The girl wrapped both arms around her neck. "You came back," she whispered. Ethan stepped inside and lowered himself near them. "Are you hurt?" Lily shook her head. "I got scared when the fog covered the trail. Grandpa always said to come here." She held up the pharmacy bag. "I got his medicine." Ethan looked at the label. Samuel Hart. One refill. Picked up at 4:38 that morning. "Why were you alone?" he asked. Lily's eyes dropped. "Grandpa was sleeping. He said he felt fine last night. I thought I could get back before he woke up." Nova stayed pressed against her, calm now. Ethan removed his field jacket and placed it around Lily's shoulders. "Your grandfather is safe. Help is on the way." The girl looked up quickly. "He came looking for me?" "He did." Lily closed her eyes for a moment. "I knew he would." Ethan glanced around the station. Faded switches lined one wall. An old emergency lantern rested on a shelf. Beside it lay a framed photograph covered with dust. Ethan wiped the glass with his sleeve. The image showed Samuel many years younger, standing outside the same station with 4 children and a man in a rescue jacket. "Caleb." Ethan stared at his brother's face. Younger than memory had allowed. Smiling, one hand resting on Lily's mother's shoulder. On the bottom edge of the frame, someone had written a date. The night of the flood. Lily noticed where he was looking. "Grandpa says that man saved them." Ethan held the frame carefully. "He was my brother." Lily looked from the photograph to Ethan. "Then he saved you too." Ethan almost answered that Caleb had not come home, that some things could not be called saving. But Nova lifted her head and watched him, the same way she had watched from the road. Ethan looked down at the 2 watches beneath his sleeve, ticking beside each other. Perhaps saving was not always returning. Sometimes it was leaving a path clear enough for someone else to follow. A radio crackled outside. Deputy Ellis called Ethan's name through the fog. Nova stood, but did not run. She looked at Lily first, then at Ethan. The final choice was no longer where to go. It was who needed to be led next. Deputy Mark Ellis emerged from the fog with a portable radio in one hand and a medical pack over his shoulder. 2 volunteer responders followed several yards behind him, their flashlights cutting pale lines through the mist. Ethan stepped outside the signal station and raised one hand. "She is safe," he said. Cold, tired, but alert. Ellis nodded once, then looked past him toward Lily and Nova. "Samuel, under the bridge. He needs his prescription and a proper evaluation." One responder entered the station to check Lily, while the other turned back toward the lower trail. Ellis lifted the radio and relayed Samuel's location using the red cord markers Ethan had tied along the route. The reply came through broken static. A team had reached the shelter. Samuel was awake and waiting. Ethan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders, though the morning still seemed suspended between fog and memory. Lily held the pharmacy bag tightly against her chest. Nova remained beside her, one paw resting near the girl's boot. "Can we take the upper access road down?" Ellis asked. Ethan unfolded Caleb's map across the old control desk. "There is a service track on the west side. It should lead to the county road." Ellis studied the faded line. "This route has not appeared on any current map for years." Ethan looked at Caleb's handwriting. It appeared when it mattered. They left the station slowly. Lily walked between Ethan and Ellis with Mason's field jacket wrapped around her shoulders. Nova moved ahead, then stopped at every bend until the group reached her. The fog began to lift as they descended. Trees emerged first, dark trunks rising from the white. Then the river appeared in pieces below them, silver and calm beneath the bridge. At the old service gate, an emergency vehicle waited with its lights dimmed against the morning haze. Samuel sat inside beneath a blanket, his face still pale but stronger after receiving water and his prescribed medicine. The moment Lily saw him, she ran the last few steps. Samuel opened his arms, and Nova reached them a second later, circling once before sitting close enough to touch both of them. Ethan stopped at the edge of the road. Their reunion was quiet. No speeches, no questions. Only Samuel's hand on Lily's hair and the girl repeating that she was sorry. Samuel shook his head. "You came back," he said. Lily pressed the pharmacy bag into his hands. So did Nova. The shepherd looked toward Ethan. For the first time since she had stepped into his headlights, she was no longer asking him to follow. Ellis approached, carrying the wooden box from the shelter. The volunteers found this with Samuel's things. He handed it to Ethan. Inside rested Caleb's field watch, the returned letters, and the original flood map. Ethan placed the older watch beside his own. One still ticking, one silent. For years, he had thought the silence meant Caleb's story had ended beneath the bridge. Now he understood that the map, the rescued children, and Samuel's promise had carried it forward. Samuel watched from the vehicle. "Your brother came back for another family that night," he said. "He did not know us. He did not ask whether anyone would remember." Ethan closed the box carefully. "Did he say anything before he left?" Samuel looked toward the river. "He said the safest path is the one someone else can still use after you are gone." The words settled into Ethan with none of the sharpness of grief. They felt like an instruction. Ellis offered to reopen the old county file using Samuel's statement, the returned letters, and the map. Ethan agreed, but the official answer no longer felt like the only answer that mattered. Caleb had reached the signal station. He had led Samuel and 4 children above the fog. He had left a route clear enough for Lily, Nova, and Ethan to use 12 years later. By mid-morning, the last of the mist pulled away from the bridge. Nora Whitman arrived from the diner with coffee, warm biscuits, and a wool coat for Lily. Samuel was taken to the clinic for observation, and Lily rode beside him with Nova at her feet. Before the vehicle door closed, the shepherd looked back at Ethan. He stepped closer and touched the worn brown collar. No tag, no name except the one Samuel had spoken. "You did good, Nova," he said. Her amber eyes held his for a moment. Then the door closed, and the vehicle rolled toward town. Ethan remained beside the road with Caleb's box beneath one arm. Above him, the bridge no longer looked like the place where his brother had vanished. It looked like the place where one good man had shown others how to find higher ground. 3 days later, Ethan stood inside the county records office with Caleb's wooden box open on a metal table. Morning rain tapped against the narrow windows. Deputy Ellis had arranged the meeting with an archivist, 2 retired rescue volunteers, and Samuel, who sat nearby with Lily and Nova. Samuel looked stronger now. Color had returned to his face, though he still moved carefully. Nova rested beneath his chair, her head between her paws, watching Ethan whenever papers changed hands. The old flood file had been thin, too thin. A map of washed-out roads, a list of damaged radios, several witness names with no follow-up notes. Caleb's final route had been marked as unknown. Ethan had read those words for years until they felt permanent. The archivist placed Caleb's hand-drawn map beside the county version. The faded service path matched a corridor omitted from the official report. Samuel leaned forward and pointed to the signal station. "He brought us here," he said. 4 children and me." He checked every name twice before he went back down. One retired volunteer studied the returned letters from Samuel's box. "These were sent to the right county," she said. "They should have reached the family liaison office." Ellis examined the faded postal markings. The office moved after the flood. Some mail was routed through temporary buildings. Ethan looked at the stack. 11 years of effort resting inside paper envelopes. He had imagined a secret held deliberately. The truth was less dramatic and somehow more painful. No villain, no conspiracy, just offices changing, records failing, and one promise traveling through the wrong doors. Samuel watched him. "I should have found another way." Ethan shook his head. "You kept trying." The words surprised both of them. For 12 years, Ethan had carried anger because anger felt more useful than uncertainty. Now, Sitting across from the man who had guarded Caleb's watch, he could see that Samuel had carried a different weight. Gratitude with nowhere to go. Ellis opened a fresh statement form. Samuel began again from the beginning. He described the rising river, the children waiting near the turnout, Caleb arriving through the fog, and the route to higher ground. His voice broke only once, when he recalled Caleb removing the broken watch and placing it in his hand. He said his brother had the other one. Samuel remembered. He said that if he was late, I should make sure it found its way home. Ethan looked down at his own wrist. The second hand moved steadily beneath the scratched glass. Beside it on the table, Caleb's watch remained silent. Lily reached into her coat pocket and placed the blue glove near the wooden box. It had been washed and dried at the clinic. I dropped it near the bridge, she said. Nova kept trying to bring me back, but I thought getting the medicine mattered more. Samuel placed his hand over hers. You mattered more. Lily looked at Nova. She knew that. The shepherd raised her head at the sound of her name. Ethan thought of the road before dawn. Nova standing in the headlights. Not lost. Not frightened. Choosing the first person who stopped. The archivist turned the county map around. With Samuel's statement and the physical records, we can amend the report. Caleb Cole's final confirmed action will show that he led 5 civilians to the signal station. Ethan did not answer immediately. He had waited years for official words, believing they might close something inside him. But closure did not arrive like a door shutting. It came more quietly. A corrected line. A witness still alive. A child sitting safely beside her grandfather. A dog asleep beneath the table after finishing the work no one had assigned her. Add the route, Ethan said. Not only his name. Mark the path so no one loses it again. Ellis nodded. The archivist drew a careful line onto the updated map. From the lower bridge, up the maintenance trail, to the signal station above the fog. When the meeting ended, Samuel invited Ethan to the small house he shared with Lily near the old rail yard. The porch railing leaned outward, 2 shutters hung loose, and rainwater gathered beneath a broken gutter. Ethan stood in the yard studying the repairs. This needs more than one afternoon, he said. Samuel smiled faintly. I was afraid you might notice. The following morning, Ethan returned with lumber, tools, and a thermos of coffee. He repaired the railing first, then the gutter. Lily painted the new boards while Samuel sorted hardware from an old coffee can. Nova moved between them, carrying a work glove she had no intention of returning. For the first time in years, Ethan missed a dock shift without feeling that his life had slipped further behind. At sunset, he packed his tools into the pickup. Nova followed him to the gate. Your house is that way, Ethan said, nodding toward Lily. The shepherd looked back at the porch. Lily stood beside Samuel, one hand resting on the new railing. Then Nova looked at Ethan again. She walked to his truck, placed one paw on the running board, and waited. Lily smiled, but her eyes were wet. She does that every time someone she trusts leaves, she said. Ethan looked at the open cab, then at Nova. I am coming back tomorrow. The shepherd studied him for one long second before stepping down. She returned to Lily, but sat facing the road until Ethan's taillights disappeared. The next morning, Ethan returned before 8 with a bundle of cedar boards tied in the bed of his pickup and Caleb's wooden box resting on the passenger seat. The sky had cleared overnight, leaving the town washed in pale blue light. Samuel was already on the porch with a mug of coffee, and Lily stood beside the gate in a yellow rain jacket. Nova waited in the yard. The moment she heard the truck, she ran to the fence, then stopped before reaching it, watching to see whether Ethan would come through as promised. He stepped out and lifted one hand. Told you I would be back. Nova's tail moved once. She followed him to the porch, but did not press against him. Trust, Ethan was learning, did not always arrive as affection. Sometimes it arrived as quiet permission to remain. They worked through the morning. Ethan replaced 2 damaged steps, secured the loose shutters, and built a simple shelf inside the kitchen for Samuel's medicine. Lily measured boards with serious concentration, while Samuel read the numbers twice to make sure she had them right. Nova carried scraps of wood from one side of the yard to the other, convinced she had been given an important assignment. Near noon, Nora Whitman arrived with sandwiches and hot soup from the diner. She set the food on the porch rail and studied Ethan. You missed 3 dock shifts this week. I know. They may replace you. Ethan looked toward Samuel's house, the repaired gutter, and Lily painting the final step. Then they replace me. Nora smiled as though she had been waiting years to hear him say something like that. After lunch, Deputy Ellis pulled into the driveway carrying a large envelope from the county office. Inside was the amended flood report. Caleb's final confirmed route had been added in black ink, along with the names of Samuel and the 4 children he had guided to the signal station. A second page approved the old maintenance path for inspection and possible restoration as an emergency foot route. Ethan read every line slowly. The report did not change what happened 12 years ago. It did something smaller and more honest. It placed the truth where silence had been. Samuel stood beside him. Your brother deserved to come home in some form. Ethan looked at the map. He did. That afternoon, they drove to the signal station together. Samuel remained in the truck while Ethan, Lily, Nova, and Ellis followed the upper trail. The fog was gone. Sunlight reached the river, and for the first time Ethan could see how close the bridge stood to the hillside path. What had once seemed like a maze was only a route hidden by weather and neglect. At the station, Ellis mounted a temporary trail marker near the door. Lily placed the framed photograph inside beneath the old emergency lantern. Ethan added a copy of Caleb's map. He kept the original folded safely in the wooden box. On the back of the frame, he wrote the words Samuel had remembered. The safest path is the one someone else can still use after you are gone. Nova sat near the doorway, facing downhill. Ethan watched her ears move at every sound from the river. She still checks the trail, Lily said. She always checks where everyone is. Ethan looked at the dog, then at the girl. Who trained her? Lily touched the worn brown collar. My mother. She taught Nova to find people when the fog came in. After Mom passed away, Nova stayed with us. Ethan glanced toward her. I am sorry. Lily nodded, accepting the words without turning them into a larger sorrow. Grandpa says some dogs keep doing the work because they do not know it is finished. Nova looked back at them. Ethan understood that kind of work. On the walk down, Lily moved beside him while Nova traveled between them, running ahead, returning, checking. At the house, Samuel waited on the porch with Caleb's silent watch in his palm. This belongs with you, he said. Ethan took it, but instead of putting it inside the box, he secured the old leather strap beside his own watch. One running, one still, 2 brothers sharing the same wrist again. As evening settled over the yard, Ethan loaded his tools into the pickup. Nova followed him to the gate as she had the day before. This time, she placed both front paws on the running board. Lily came up behind her. She wants to go with you. Ethan looked at the girl. She belongs here. She belongs where she chooses to help. Samuel stepped onto the porch. Take her for the night. Bring her back tomorrow. Let her decide what the road means. Ethan opened the passenger door. Nova did not jump in. She looked first at Lily, then at Samuel. Lily knelt and placed both hands against the shepherd's face. Go make sure he gets home. Nova touched her nose to Lily's forehead, turned, and climbed into the truck. Ethan started the engine. As they pulled away, Nova stood with her front paws on the seat and watched the house until it disappeared behind the trees. Then she settled beside Caleb's wooden box and rested her head near Ethan's hand. The road ahead was clear, but when a thin ribbon of fog crossed the river, Nova raised her head. Ethan slowed without being asked. For the first time, he was not afraid of where the mist might lead. By sunrise, Nova was asleep on the rug beside Ethan's couch, one ear turned toward the window and the other toward the quiet room. Ethan had not expected the house to feel different with a dog inside it. The furniture had not moved. The walls were still bare. Caleb's wooden box still rested on the kitchen table. Yet the silence no longer felt empty. It felt occupied, watched over. When Ethan entered the kitchen, Nova lifted her head but did not rise until he reached for his jacket. Then she stood at once and moved toward the door. Not yet, he said. She looked at him with the same patient expression she had worn in the road. Ethan poured coffee, opened the wooden box, and placed Caleb's silent watch beside the original map. For years, he had treated every object connected to his brother as proof of what was missing. Now the watch seemed to say something else. Time had not stopped beneath the bridge. It had continued through Samuel, Lily, and the path Caleb had left behind. Ethan wrapped the watch carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he opened the front door. Nova stepped outside and waited beside the pickup. They returned to Samuel's house before 8. Lily was already on the porch, and when Nova jumped down, the girl ran to meet her. The shepherd pressed against her for a long moment, then turned to check Ethan. Samuel noticed. She made sure both homes were still there, he said. Ethan looked at Nova. Maybe she has not chosen yet. Lily shook her head. Maybe she does not think she has to lose one to help the other. The word stayed with Ethan as they drove back toward the bridge later that morning. Deputy Ellis had arranged a small gathering at the restored trail entrance. No ceremony, no speeches, just several town workers, Nora Whitman, Samuel, Lily, and a new wooden marker placed beside the path. It carried Caleb's name and a simple line beneath it. He led others to higher ground. Ethan stood in front of the marker while fog drifted lightly above the river. Not thick enough to hide the bridge, only enough to soften its edges. Ellis handed him the amended report. This is the final copy. Ethan folded it once and placed it inside Caleb's wooden box. Thank you. Ellis nodded toward the trail. The county approved volunteer maintenance. We could use someone who knows emergency routes. Ethan looked at the steps, the signal station above, and Nova waiting at the first turn. I might know someone. Nora laughed softly. That is the first job offer I have seen a dog arrange. They walked the route together. Samuel moved slowly with a cane. Lily stayed close to him. Ethan carried the wooden box beneath one arm, and Nova traveled between everyone, running ahead, returning, and counting the group in the only way she knew. At the signal station, Ethan placed Caleb's silent watch inside a small display case beside the framed map. He kept his own watch on his wrist. One belonged to the past. One still had work to do. Samuel touched the glass. He would have wanted people to use this place. Ethan looked through the window toward the bridge. Then we keep it open. Over the following weeks, that became his new routine. He left the docks and began working with the county rescue volunteers, clearing brush, marking safe trails, and teaching hikers what to do when fog covered the river roads. Samuel helped restore old maintenance records. Lily designed new red trail markers. Nova became the one everyone watched. She never pulled ahead too far, never allowed the last person in a group to fall out of sight. Each morning, she arrived with Lily. Each evening, she chose where to sleep. Sometimes beside Lily's bed, sometimes on Ethan's rug. No one forced the decision. One cold morning in early winter, Ethan finished securing a new handrail near the bridge and returned to his pickup. Nova stood between the open passenger door and Lily, who waited with Samuel near the trail sign. Ethan did not call her. Lily did not hold her collar. The shepherd looked back at the girl. Lily smiled and touched 2 fingers to her heart. Go on, she said. He still forgets the way home. Nova crossed the gravel and climbed into Ethan's truck. Then she turned, rested her front paws on the seat, and watched until Lily and Samuel waved. Ethan closed the door gently. As they drove away, the bridge appeared in the rearview mirror, no longer swallowed by fog. Sunlight reached the river beneath it. Nova settled beside him, her head near his hand. Ethan touched the field watch on his wrist and listened to its steady ticking. For 12 years, he had believed his brother's story ended where the road disappeared. He understood now that some stories do not end when a person is gone. They become paths. They wait in old maps, returned letters, repaired steps, and the memory of those who were led to safety. Sometimes the living find those paths on their own. Sometimes they need a loyal dog to walk into the fog, look back, and make sure they follow.